peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
Good morning to you, and thank you so much again for joining us. The show this time is The People's Court. My name is Amira Mogutu, and it is a pleasure to have you on board. So there are some pronouncements and some initiatives that the government is currently undertaking in regards to improving the infrastructure of some of the public institutions, as well as adding some classes, a directive that was given through the Ministry of Education. So that is what will form the basis, the premise of our conversation this morning as we look at public education, what the government is doing and what can be done, and what also has worked and what hasn't worked, so that we can ensure that our children go to school, because we know majority of the kids in this school depend on those public schools. So a better environment, quality infrastructure, enough teaching staff will go a long way in ensuring children around the country are not left behind. And on top of that, this is a subject that is very close to my heart. All right, so let's bring in my panelists this morning. I'm joined by Sharon Gitonga. Sharon, a very good morning to you.
Thank you very much, Miriam, and indeed a very good morning to you back at the headquarters in Nairobi, and to all our viewers are watching across the country and across the globe at large. It is a pleasure to be part of this morning show segment. Good morning.
Okay, thank you so much. So we do know that the Ministry of Education has moved to implement a directive by the President that will pave way for the smooth transition of CBC pioneers to junior secondary schools in 2023. Education Cabinet Secretary is leading talks with multi-sectional team that has been tasked with the implementation of an order issued on Mashujaa Day to construct over 10,000 new classes to facilitate 100% transition for the grade 6 candidates set to join junior secondary schools at the national and county levels. President Kenyatta on Wednesday, the 20th of October, in Kirinyaga, directed the Ministry of Education jointly with that of Interior and Treasury to establish a framework for the construction of the extra classes needed to provide the additional learning space for the 1.1 million grade 6 learners. And Treasury is expected to engage Parliament and appropriate about 8 billion Kenya shillings towards the venture that will undertake by local contractors in all respective sub-counties. Now, over 8.1 million children have enrolled under the new education system, which the President said will continuously be enriched. And of course, Mr. President called on all members of Parliament to prioritize the allocation of CDF towards school infrastructure. The new curriculum, which was launched in 2017 to replace the 844 system, puts emphasis on competencies and talents. And so we've also been joined by Samuel Tawish. Tawish, a very good morning to you. Okay, so as we wait for Tawish to set up, the government has now committed to building over 10,000 new classes to facilitate 100% transition in public schools. Your comments on that, Sharon?
Thank you very much, Miriam. And indeed, it's a new dawn, and it's very, very, very good news. Coming to a point where the president is so committed to ensuring that education is actually, if you actually look at the things that he actually the goodies, like people would call it, you realize that education had actually been given, had been pumped more and had been given much more priority, even when it comes to the money that was allocated to this. So for me, it's quite a good thing, and it's actually quite encouraging to see that the president is actually committed to seeing that there's actually education to everyone, and everyone is actually everyone is able to access education, because you realize even the basic of schools, just like I had actually mentioned earlier, education is equally very important. Someone said that an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. So you see, school comes in by it's able to shape how you're able to think. It shapes the character of a person, and it actually prepares. Even when it comes to matters leadership, it prepares a person. When it comes to leadership, it equally, helps you to be able to navigate through the economic dynamics, and not just that. Even when it comes to undertakings of financial, so school and education at large is equally very important. But then, Miriam, there's also the question of how the president is so committed, but then there's also sabotage equally, especially at the grassroots when it comes to MC.
Yes, and I totally understand that, and we will I get your point, and we'll bring that in as we continue with this conversation, because as it appears, this construction will not be overseen by the principals of the schools, but they will be overseen by the chiefs who will be the ones supervising in their locations and sub-locations what's really happening. So we'll get into that in a bit. Samuel Tawish, good morning.
Good morning to you, Miriam. Good morning to Sharon Gitonga, and of course, our viewers who are watching this program across the world.
All right, so the government is set to build more 10,000 classrooms across the country to help in the transition, and also to improve generally the infrastructure of the schools, in public schools especially. What will this mean to these schools?
Well, Miriam, one thing we have to appreciate is that our population, especially our young generation, is actually growing every other day, and therefore there's need to expand this infrastructure and to expand these facilities so that by the end of the day, nobody is left out. No children is left out of school for simple reason that we do not have enough infrastructure, or we do not have enough facilities to be able to accommodate them. And of course, also acknowledging the fact that we have the new curriculum in place, which is taking shape, Miriam. This new curriculum really will call for more infrastructure because in itself is not like the 844 system that we have been used to. So this CBC curriculum, Miriam, really calls for an expanded and a well-moduled kind of infrastructure that will be able really to take cognizant of the new dynamics of the new curriculum in our learning institutions, Miriam. So in itself, I think it's a very good move by the government to actually allocate and commit funds to this particular initiative, and make sure that it's going to be a success by the end of the day, because people have been complaining out here, parents have been complaining, and even teachers are saying that yes, we have a new curriculum in place, but this new curriculum really calls for a new approach in terms of new infrastructure or expanded infrastructure, even when it comes to the staff or the personnel. In terms of teachers, we'll also need more teachers in place, and if need be, also refresher courses for the teachers. So this is part and parcel of making sure that we have a fully fledged infrastructure that is going to accommodate the challenges and the dynamics that come with the new curriculum, that is CBC. In itself, Miriam, I'm very hopeful with the 10 billion Kenya shillings being pumped into this particular initiative, and also with the call from the head of state that the members of parliament should really see into it how they can commit a bigger percentage of the Constituency Development Fund, CDF, into making sure that this is going to be a success in our learning institution in various parts of the country. Then by the end of the day, hopefully we are going to achieve this noble cause by ensuring that our learners have a very good learning infrastructure and facility, so that they do not have an excuse as to why they cannot perform. Teachers cannot have an excuse as to why they cannot be able to impact knowledge on our learning students. Miriam, I submit.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's see how the studies paper has captured that story this morning. On page 7 of the Star newspaper, principals lose power to control 8.1 billion Kenya shillings budget. Each classroom will cost about 800,000. Now, secondary school principals have lost past string powers in the construction of 11,600 classrooms to help in the double take of students to secondary schools in 2023. The classrooms will cost an average of 800,000 Kenya shillings each, and construction is projected to be completed by April 2022. Phase 1 will cost 8.1 billion, according to Education Ministry. Unlike the tradition where school heads are provided money for the construction of the classes, the Education Ministry has centralized the project and will be responsible for contracting and paying for the construction. Daniel Wesonga, why do you think the Ministry of Education had to take this move?
Yes, sorry, Miriam, I didn't get the question quite well. If you could just...
All right, so I'll have to go back again. Okay, now secondary schools principals have lost past string powers in the construction of 11,600 classrooms to help in the double take of students to secondary schools in 2023. And of course, the Ministry of Education has released about 8.1 billion Kenya shillings for the first phase, and these schools, these new classrooms are supposed to be completed by April of 2022. The Education Ministry has centralized the project and will be responsible for contracting and paying for the construction. And unlike the past, where the principals of these schools were responsible for the the people who are overseeing the construction of these schools, this will not be the case. Why do you think the ministry? What necessitated this move by the Ministry of Education, you think?
Yes, thank you, Miriam. And of course, these are very, very big steps towards ensuring that we have efficiency in the construction of the infrastructure of our schools. I'll bring to your attention one particular school from where I come from, called Galame Boys High School, which is a very, very big school. It used to be a provincial school before the current system came into place. And therefore, this school has been having a lot of wrangles between the principal and the cartels who are purported to be the suppliers of the school. And that consequently has led to a very unfortunate incident of where the school is perpetually razed down by fires and the students are never in the school compound. So you realize that when we have this push and pull between the cartels and principal, you realize it happens at the detriment of the students, because the cartels realize that if they burn down a dormitory, then they're going to be given a contract to actually construct. Or maybe if they don't want the principal to be in a particular school, then they have to sponsor some kind of student unrest, burning of the dormitories, and all those kind of retrogressive things. So all this happened because they were aiming at getting some money to cash out some money from these tenders that came from building the structures and everything. So I believe once the Ministry of Education takes over the building and the construction of classes and any other amenities of the schools, it will be a big step towards eliminating this kind of cartelism that has been happening. And this has actually been benefiting the cartels and the principals who are involved in this, because this has been the cash cow for the principals as well as their cronies who have been cutting deals and making sure that only a little of this money goes into the project themselves. Because sometimes you might realize that a certain school tells you that this particular classroom was constructed for 5 million Kenyan shillings. But when you go to that particular structure, it is a ramshackle, Miriam. It does not represent that amount of money that was given by the Ministry of Education to the school administration for the construction of that particular structure. So I think it will bring out accountability, and it will also cut out the vicious circle of cartels which always surrounded the school principals and the heads of schools, and made quite difficult for development and other projects to be rolled out in the school precincts. So I believe that's a very, very good step towards reforming our schools. And we need to see the outcome of such projects. And then if it works, Miriam, if it brings forth some good results, then I think that is the kind of road that our Ministry of Education should actually follow up. We had a similar problem in the Ministry of Health when CS Mutahi Kagwe went into the ministry, where some few procurement individuals in the Department of Finance actually sat on the tenders, and their work was not to serve the best interest of the citizens of this country, but actually to strike deals and make money out of tenders at the ministry. And our hospitals were actually failing. We did not have drugs in the hospitals. We did not have even clean facilities for our patients, no enough bed capacities. And also you realize that health workers were not being paid. So I think that is the kind of mess that we need to sort from our departments and ministries throughout government. I submit.
Okay. Now, in the project, regional and county directors of education will be responsible for identifying the contractors and overseeing the construction exercise. Chiefs, on the other hand, will oversee construction at the school level. Education Cabinet Secretary George Magoha on Wednesday said that the funds will directly be wired to the contractors upon completion of the project. So, of course, maybe this was an effort to seal some, corruption loopholes and maybe to enhance effectiveness and accountability and on these projects that is very important in terms of improving the infrastructures of schools, the public schools. Sharon, will they be able to achieve this? The Ministry.
Thank you much. Thank you very much, Miriam. And I think this is actually a very good move towards fighting the rampant of corruption that is actually everywhere, not just in our politics, but you find the same politics have been taken to school, so I think this whole idea of it's actually going to ensure that we have accountability, efficiency, and even transparency, because you find other times where the principals could handle, they would actually give exorbitant prices, whereby a desk is actually quoted 10 times a price, the original quote, and you find that they work, hand in hand with the cartels. So I think this is actually a good move, and it's actually going to, clear out impunity and corruption that has been in schools, and in that sense, it actually has hindered, the development of schools for the longest time. Thank you.
Okay, so let's see how not the Sunday. Look at me. We are on Thursday. Why is my mind on Sunday? I'm not that tired, really. But the Standard newspaper. Chiefs will supervise the construction of 11,600 new classrooms in schools countrywide, according to Education Cabinet Secretary George Magoha. And Interior's Fred Matiang'i. The classes will be constructed in the first phase and will accommodate learners transiting from primary to junior secondary schools. Dr. Matiang'i told officers to start preparing for the projects as the classroom should be ready to accommodate learners by 2023. And what I heard when I was watching the news last night was a very stern warning to the chiefs, and they were told they will be held accountable if these projects don't turn out the way they should. Is this the kind of working we did in this country if we need work to be done? Samuel Tawish.
Yes, indeed, Miriam. I tend to agree with the government that this is the way things should be done, because we've done things the same way for far too long, but we've always achieved bad results. And that's why you see government is adopting a new strategy altogether to be able to achieve this noble objective. And why are they doing this? Because they've noticed in the past when these monies are just being dispersed to the schools directly, the school principals and maybe their cohorts just misuse or misappropriate these funds, and they do not do that which was intended for. And by the end of the day, there's that feeling of disaffection towards government, because when government comes out, Miriam, and says they have given out, say, 100 million Kenya shillings for the construction of, 5 classrooms in a given school, and then by the end of the day, these classrooms are not even built in the first place. And even if they are built, they do not quite reflect the monies that were allocated for that particular project, just like what Sean Wesonga has said. Yes, a classroom or an infrastructure has been erected, but again, it doesn't quite reflect in terms of how it has been built. It doesn't quite reflect the monies that purportedly have been allocated for that particular project. So in itself, first and foremost, I think the reason why this has been done or has been arrived at is to seal the loopholes of corruption, so that the monies really go to these schools, they go for the intended projects, and by the end of the day, the people of Kenya will be really happy with their government. because President Uhuru Kenyatta out here may be feeling, maybe in Nairobi, that maybe his government has disbursed this amount to schools. But by the end of the day, there's nothing really to show for these monies. This money has gone into a few people's pocket, and also the awarding of contracts, Miriam. And that's why you see the ministry this time is very, very keen. The principals in schools have been giving these tenders or contracts to people they know, to their cronies, to their family members, and people who may not necessarily be qualifying to be able to undertake these projects because of its complexity. But because this is a person I know, this is my relative, or this is my friend, we end up awarding these tenders or contracts to these individuals. By the end of the day, the end product or project is just a shoddy one that does not quite reflect the monies which were allocated for that project. So this will go a long way in really sealing loopholes of corruption, and also making sure that accountability and transparency is really achieved. When you have the chiefs, chiefs answer directly to the presidency. There are public administration watchdogs or eyes, of course, at the local level. So when they will be held accountable for making sure that these projects are going to be a success, then I can quite tell you, Miriam, that by the time we will be actualizing this project, and by the time they will be handing over these classrooms to the schools to be able to carry out, of course, learning activities, I can quite tell you that we are going to have a very big departure from the past, because for the chiefs, they know very well what it means to go against the president's directive, the president's decree. It is not as what teachers are used to be, because teachers are more like civil servants, ordinary civil servants, who are not quite answerable to the president directly. So for engaging chiefs is going to make sure that we are going to have very tangible actions and results in as far as this execution of these projects are concerned. And by the end of the day, the teachers, the parents and learners will actually have a smile, and they'll have nice facilities and infrastructure to be able to carry out learning activities in our learning institutions. Miriam, I submit.
Okay, thank you. Now, each of the classes will cost 800,000 Kenya shillings, as I have told you there earlier, and the overall target is 20,000 of them. These new classrooms will, however, be less, as the CBC task force report projected that the government needs to create 37,000 new ones nationally to cater for the anticipated double intake of learners. So I think the ones they're constructing now, the target is for them to be completed by April next year, but I'm sure there will be another phase where these other ones will be constructed, because I don't think there's any other way around this with the new education curriculum that is needed. But while they're at it right now, Daniel Wasonga, are there other areas of education when it comes to the infrastructure in our public schools that the government could address, especially in the marginalized areas?
Yes, Miriam Ogutu. And of course, mentioning that each class is going to be costing around 800,000. That is a bit of a milestone for the Ministry of Education, because initially a class could cost even as much as even 2 million, even 3 million, depending on who is implementing the construction of the class. And that is due to all these leakages that of the money that goes to the cartels in the entire cycle. So I believe that's a great milestone, like I mentioned. And to the Ministry of Education, I remember prior to the ascendance of Mwai Kibaki in 2002, no one ever thought that we could have a free primary education in Kenya. But when Kibaki took power, we saw a lot of construction happening in our primary school, despite the fact that the parents were not paying school fees. We saw most primary schools being built, a lot of dilapidated structures being repaired and renovated. We saw even electricity for the first time being connected to some of the primary schools in the villages. And that is what happens, Miriam, when you see, when you close all the holes that are actually perforated in our system by corruption. If that money, which is lost through the corruption enterprise, will be directed to something else, then we have enough money to be able to oversee the welfare of our children. We have even enough money to go to our hospitals to enable us to access free medical care. So I think what now the government ought to do is to make sure that they build more structures, especially in the field of information technology. Remember, Miriam, we are living in the 21st century. we are living in the era where the world is perceived as a global village. And in as much as even the Jubilee government promised that learners below in lower classes will be given laptops when they were vying for their first time, I think that is something that has been remained just a promise, whereas other countries are actually advancing in such kind of sphere. So I believe it will be prudent for the Ministry of Education to actually set up, even if it is not necessarily having each learner to own a laptop, let them construct these computer labs so that a student in Lokichoge, a student in Busia, can be able to access a computer lab and be able to know what is all this about internet, what is all this about Google and all those, because right now those are the things that the CBC is teaching these children. We need to have a place where they could even print their own homework and be able even to go and research about the assignments that are given through the CBC curriculum. So without that, Miriam, it will be a bit hectic to actually have a transition from the older system into the current CBC system, because majority of the people in the rural economies are actually people who cannot afford maybe some bundles. There are people who are living below $1 a day. So if the Ministry of Education can do that initiative on their side, it will be a great milestone. Another thing, you mentioned the semi-arid areas. I think we've seen so many times news media houses rather highlighting the issue of students walking kilometers and kilometers of road to go to attend school. We have also seen the security situations in areas in arid and semi-arid areas, and especially even in Nanyuki, Laikipia, and also some sides of Mandera, Wajir, and all those northern frontier counties where students are at a perpetual fear of being attacked by bandits. We need the Ministry of Education to build dormitories so that most of those schools are converted into boarding schools where they are provided with food and also other basic amenities, so that they do not have to walk kilometers and risk their lives to just search for education. Education is free in this country, and therefore they should make an environment where it is easily acquired by these learners. And at the end of the day, we shall be able to accomplish the Millennium Goals when it comes to education sector. I submit, Miriam.
All right, thank you. Daniel Songan, we know during the Mashujaa Day celebrations, President Uhuru Kenyatta asked the members of parliament to prioritize the monies they get, the allocation of the CDF towards improving the school infrastructures in the different constituencies, because personally I've seen what CDF can do. I've said that here before. In my village, I saw how that has transformed the public schools, the added schools. A lot of them were mud, they were made out of mud, but now it's difficult to get a mud school. They've all been transformed into a brick and all that. And of course, with the coming of electrification, the last mile, it made all the difference. But that is not the case across the Republic of Kenya. We've seen cases where you look at a picture of children learning in a structure that is falling apart under trees and all that. And sometimes, it can be very heartbreaking, because there's no reason as to why in the 21st century we cannot have proper, learning infrastructure for our children in this country. You cannot convince me that, we are not able to do that. So if, the members of parliament who are in charge of this CDF kitty could take this as a challenge by President Uhuru Kenyatta or the government and do their part in terms of improving the education conditions in their constituencies, together with a concerted effort from the national government, how do you think this will change the public education sector, Sharon?
Thank you very much. And indeed, when you talk about CDF and other disbursements, you find that there's actually a public outcry. Your village might have transformed, especially when you talk about the CDF. But I would, dare you to walk around the interior villages and even ask around the villagers on their satisfaction of how this money has actually been able to be spent. And one thing that I can guarantee you that will come out very clearly is that they will start pointing out to you at the MCAs, the new. You find that it's actually the time where these MCAs and MPs have suddenly started driving big cars, and actually to some extent some have even moved to the urban cities. So there's a very there's actually
instead of staying in the villages and
yes,
the people.
Yes, yes. Yes, to urban, and this is where they have found a shelter. And on the other hand, people are really crying, especially in the villages. So when all is said and done, there's a need of having bringing these rogue leaders to book for having because we know them very well. Money is actually given to from the national government. Money is dispersed to the counties and to the constituencies at large. But you see, there is no development. There's a high need of bringing these leaders. Of certain counties to bring to book and actually holding them accountable for having misused public funds that is actually meant for development. And I think here IEBC and the likes of other bodies of like EACC have also a mandate to play to even now as we even approach towards the season of election, if anything, actually disqualify these people because you cannot just meddle around with public funds that are actually meant for development and just it cannot be business as usual. You cannot just walk free. It's high time that we actually tighten the systems of accountability and also, I'll be very conscious with the needs of the people and not their own needs. So I believe whatever the stringent measures that the government has put in place, they are going to go a long way to curb the impunity that has lived all along with these said leaders. So I believe this is actually going to go a long way. Moving forward, I love what the measures that the government has done, but maybe moving forward, I was actually reading I think in one of the local newspapers, I think Kagwe said that 300 nurses have they settled for a test, and I think only 10 people who actually ended up qualifying. And I don't know if it's something that the government can actually deploy. And I think for me, what came out strongly,
we have to communicate. We have to be clear about that. It was an English test. If you're going to the UK, then you have
English
to
test. And you see now,
but that does not mean that our nurses are not qualified. Let's just make that clear.
They are, Miriam. I said they are very qualified.
Yes.
But when it comes to effective communication, that is English, and this is something that maybe has. People don't really take so keen, and they don't actually take into consideration, especially with these courses. You find that nursing. Anyone who has studied journalism and media or even law knows how much English and rather communication actually goes a long way. So this same thing, I think it's high time where you find that English or rather these languages because they're actually costing them a fortune, and these are nurses that would have actually gone out because
I hear you, Sharon, and I totally understand. But me and you and Tawish and Wesonga, we can be judged on our communication skills because we are journalists. So if we are not able to communicate, then the world has a right to judge us. But our nurses, come on. All right. But I know it's a requirement. If you're going to work to certain countries, if you're going to the UK, you have to qualify and all that. And if you're going to Germany, you have to go learn some German. So it's a requirement. But nevertheless, our nurses are qualified, one of the best in the world. Na hiyo kizungu ni hao walitufunza, kwa hivyo tunaiongea. Kwa hivyo
been to hospitals, Kiswahili, so there's so much that needs to be done. Government should actually.
Yes. All right. So thank you so much. And so you brought up a very important issue, Sharon, that I do not want to sweep under the issue of accountability, especially in the manner in which the CDF money is used in the counties. Tawish, is there structures that perhaps that could be put in place, or a way that the constituencies can take stock in regards to how much they're doing to improve their education sectors in this constituency, so that we ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, even as much as the national government is doing its part. Tawish.
Thank you so much, Miriam, and my colleague panelists for the submission. Miriam, I want to tell you for sure that there are mechanisms, there are laid down structures within which those who are managing CDF are supposed to actually look up to or to undertake when they are actually managing CDF. But more often, I think the challenge has been those who are implementing or those who are enforcing all these kind of procedures are the ones who are actually assuming, or even sometimes just neglecting or leaving it for the reason that is well known to all of us, because they want loopholes where they can actually be able to swindle these monies. But Miriam, I think the appeal by President Uhuru Kenyatta to have lawmakers, members of parliament, really to be able to have to spare aside a considerable budget, really, to make sure that the education sector really thrives in our constituencies, and to that extent nationally. Miriam, is a good proposal, is a good suggestion and appeal coming from our president. But we all must appreciate the fact that it is not only that CDF is intended to deal with matters education. It's about constituency development. I mean, there are other areas of development which these monies have to be allocated. Maybe you talk about roads, you talk about water. You'll find that maybe if you go to constituencies that the aspect of making sure that there's clean water for human consumption in our constituencies, or maybe in our counties, is actually a responsibility of county governments. But you see, members of parliament cannot quite wait until a county government or a governor comes and does a borehole or a well in your constituency or in your wards for people to get this water. So sometimes there are things that these members of parliament do out of necessity. They feel like this is something that is so urgent, because more often, Miriam, there's what we call public participation. There are priorities that people are being engaged. They are being asked, what is it you think we should do with the monies that you have gotten on this financial year? Maybe you have got 100 million. And there's maybe a very bad road that is supposed to be done. Maybe people do not have water, or maybe there are other things which needs to be fixed. So there has to be a balance, Miriam, really. The reason why I see President Uhuru Kenyatta making that appeal, because we cannot postpone the implementation of the CBC curriculum program come maybe 2023. And in itself, therefore, for us to have this in place, we have to call for a well-concerted effort from all the stakeholders, including if members of parliament or CDF can really have a special allocation to make sure that they can aid or even support what the national government is doing in terms of improving the infrastructure for our learning institutions. In itself, Miriam, I don't think that it's by law that lawmakers are supposed to really have a bigger chunk of monies that are allocated for CDF really to improve our infrastructure. But if it is out of necessity, Miriam, that maybe that is what members of parliament can give as a priority, because we need a full rollout of the CBC program, and there's no place in this country that should be left behind. So if the national government maybe does not have enough allocation for this, it is good if members of parliament through the CDF kitty can come and try to see how they can aid or help national government in achieving this noble objective. But what I want to emphasize, Miriam, is that the CDF monies actually go out in attending to various other areas of development, other areas of needs for the constituents, and not necessarily education. Mm-hmm. For example, if you are to go to Northeastern today, Miriam, or if you are to go to...
Education should be just one of them, that, you know.
Yeah, that is it. And that is it. And that is why you see when President Uhuru Kenyatta was very keen and putting much emphasis and focus on lawmakers to prioritize and maybe give a bit more of allocation in terms of a percentage from the CDF kitty. I think essentially it means it is going to deprive of other sectors of development. It's going to deprive of other areas that need much attention, so that we can focus more on education. But I think the sole reason why President Uhuru Kenyatta is for the first time making that appeal on the lawmakers is simply because we have a new curriculum altogether. We need a rollout of new infrastructure so that this program can be a success. But by the end of the day, what I want to emphasize, Miriam, is that we should do this without depriving other sectors of development at our constituency, without really compromising. That is what I'm trying to say in essence, so that by the end of the day, each of these areas can get a bit of this allocation so that they can move on smoothly and efficiently. Miriam, I submit.
Okay, thank you. Daniel, conclude for us.
Yes, thank you so much, Miriam. And of course, I've heard the views of my fellow panelists, that are Rachel Assassina in Narok and my sister Sharon Gitonga. And I think it is a very good initiative if all these leaders, including the MCAs, were to rally behind the call from the president to channel more funds of their development into building schools. Because I've realized that nowadays, the coolest thing in town for the MPs is to lay cabro. They have to realize that our development is not only measured in terms of how many kilometers in terms of cabro you are able to lay in your maybe constituency, or maybe whatever you are able to do in other things, but rather education. Because when you empower people through education, you realize that they become self-sufficient in the long run. And like Mandela said, the only key to success and good life, it is through education. That is the only thing that is gonna bring equality in society between the haves and the have-nots. So I believe it's a very, very good initiative from the president, and all leaders should actually heed to the call and follow cue. We, like I mentioned earlier on, that during President Mwai Kibaki's era, people had just come. Had just come from the corrupt leadership of President Moi era. And of course, so many leaders believed in not even doing development in their constituencies. We had so many stories of where government ministers and also members of parliament actually gobbled down money which was meant to construct roads and all that, even schools. So with this onset of a new developmental record by the government of President Mwai Kibaki, we saw actually most MPs actually channeling those monies into building schools. And so many schools, when you go to the rural areas, have the national government CDF kitty maybe indication on the new blocks that have been constructed. So I think that is something that is good. And I believe from President Uhuru Kenyatta's infrastructural legacy, they should copy something from that and be able to go above and beyond in terms of even doing whatever I mentioned, building those computer labs. That is something that can be done by the MPs. I've seen the MP for Ugunja, that is Opio and Wandai, and even his Ugenya counterpart, David Ocheng, constructing even KMTCs and all that. That is something good. That is something they can do on their own without being maybe receiving money from the relevant government ministries. So I think it's a noble call, Miriam. And if we can proceed like that other country, then prosperity is just yonder. We can all achieve that, and it's something that can benefit each and every member of the society. I submit.
Thank you. And just to reiterate your point there, Daniel Wasonga, yes, it is during the tenure of the former President Kibaki that I saw the change of public schools, especially from my village, because that's where I'm familiar with. And yes, but I don't know if anything else has been going on, I'm sure, but it is during that time with the free education and all that, there needed to be some changes. And so that is when they started. So if President Uhuru Kenyatta's administration could really build on that, and it's a good thing that they're adding more classrooms, but can we add more schools? Because we were having a conversation here yesterday, Sharon, if you can remember, there are places where kids have to walk kilometers upon kilometers to go to school. Why, even as we are adding more classrooms to the already existing schools, can we ensure that we are able to make education more accessible to a lot of these children? And that's why I brought in the issue of the marginalized societies and communities in this country. So I think the government is doing a good thing, but there's still more that we can do to ensure that we create an equal fighting opportunity when it comes to education to all the children in this country. I've told you, this is something that I'm very passionate about. So good job, government, but there's still more to be done. Thank you so much, Daniel Wasonga, Samuel Tawish, and Sharon Gitonga. I'll see you later at around 3 p.m. with more news from across the continent. My name is Miriam Mugutu. Bye-bye for now.
peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.